Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. Another flawless show, John murmured to himself, running a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair. At 18, John had become the undisputed star of his high school's theater company. His ability to inhabit any character, to breathe life into words on a page, had earned him not just accolades, but a devoted following among his peers. As he made his way backstage, a gaggle of admirers swarmed around him, showering him with compliments and praise. John soaked it all in, his ego swelling with each passing second. He caught sight of his reflection in a nearby mirror and couldn't help but smirk. He was destined for greatness, of that he was certain. Amidst the crowd, a pair of sharp eyes watched John's display with growing irritation. Mary stood in the shadows, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. At 18, she was already a prolific playwright, having penned dozens of productions since childhood. She and John had known each other for years, but lately his inflated sense of self-importance had begun to grate on her nerves. "All right, everyone, clear out!" Mary called, her voice cutting through the chatter. "We need to start prepping for the next production." The crowd dispersed, leaving John and Mary alone in the wings. John turned to her, his smile still firmly in place. "Another home run, wouldn't you say? The audience was eating out of the palm of my hand." Mary's lips thinned. "It was adequate," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "But I think it's time we pushed you out of your comfort zone, John. You've been playing the same type of roles for too long." John's brow furrowed. "What are you talking about? I can play any role you throw at me. That's what makes me the best." A glint appeared in Mary's eye, a spark of mischief and determination. "Is that so? Well, I've just finished writing a new play. It's called BARBIE, and I think you'd be perfect for the lead role." John's confidence wavered for a moment. "Barbie, as in the doll?" Mary nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Exactly. It's a challenging role, John, very feminine. Very different from anything you've done before. But if you're as versatile as you claim, it should be no problem for you." John felt a knot forming in his stomach. The thought of prancing around stage in pink dresses and high heels made him uncomfortable, to say the least. But as he opened his mouth to refuse, he caught sight of the expectant faces of his castmates who had lingered nearby, listening to their conversation. If he backed down now, it would be as good as admitting he wasn't the actor he claimed to be. His reputation, carefully cultivated over years of performances, would crumble in an instant. John swallowed hard, forcing a smile onto his face. "Of course," he said, his voice only slightly strained. "I'd be happy to take on the role. After all, a true actor can embody any character, right?" Mary's smile widened, a hint of triumph in her eyes. "Wonderful. We'll start rehearsals tomorrow. I can't wait to see what you do with the part." As Mary walked away, John felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. What had he gotten himself into? The next day, John arrived at the theater early, his stomach churning with a mix of anxiety and determination. He found Mary already there, surrounded by stacks of scripts and costume sketches. She looked up as he approached, a glimmer of amusement in her eyes. "Ah, John, right on time. Are you ready to begin your transformation into Barbie?" John squared his shoulders, putting on a brave face. "Of course. Let's get started." Mary handed him a thick script bound in bright pink paper. "Here's your copy. I suggest you start memorizing as soon as possible. We have a lot of work to do." John flipped through the pages, his eyes widening at the sheer volume of lines he would have to learn. But it wasn't just the quantity that gave him pause. It was the content. The dialogue was peppered with bubbly exclamations, fashion terminology he'd never heard of, and discussions about makeup and boys. It was a world entirely foreign to him. "This is quite something," John muttered, trying to keep the dismay out of his voice. Mary's smile was razor-sharp. "Oh, it's just the beginning. Now let's talk about your costume." She pulled out a series of sketches, each one more pink and frilly than the last. John's eyes were drawn to a particularly elaborate ball gown, complete with a tiara and elbow-length gloves. He felt his masculinity shrinking with each passing second. "You'll need to start practicing in heels as soon as possible," Mary continued, seemingly oblivious to John's discomfort. "And we'll have to work on your voice. Barbie's got a very specific way of speaking. High-pitched, bubbly, you know the type." John nodded weakly, his throat suddenly very dry. "Right, of course. No problem." As the days passed, John threw himself into the role with a determination born of desperation. He spent hours in front of the mirror, practicing his high-pitched giggle and perfecting his hair flip. He walked laps around his bedroom in borrowed high heels, wincing with each wobbly step. At school, whispers and giggles followed him through the hallways. Word had spread quickly about his new role, and not everyone was as supportive as he'd hoped. He overheard snatches of conversation as he passed by groups of students. "Can you believe John's playing Barbie? I heard he has to wear a pink tutu in one scene. I bet he's loving every minute of it." John gritted his teeth and kept his head high. He was an actor, after all. This was just another performance, another character to inhabit. He could do this. But as the weeks wore on, John found himself struggling more than he ever had before. The physicality of the role was challenging enough, learning to move gracefully in heels, to gesture delicately with manicured hands. But it was the emotional aspect that truly threw him for a loop. During one particularly grueling rehearsal, Mary stopped him mid-scene, her frustration evident. "No, no, no! You're still not getting it, John. Barbie isn't just about the clothes and the voice. You need to embody her spirit, her essence." John ran a hand through his hair, exasperated. "I'm trying, Mary, but I don't know how to think like a girl?" Mary finished for him, her eyebrow raised. "That's the whole point, John. You need to let go of your preconceptions, your ego. Barbie isn't just a character. She's a state of mind." John took a deep breath, trying to center himself. Okay, I can do this. Let me try again." He closed his eyes, forcing himself to push aside his doubts and insecurities. When he opened them again, he saw the world through Barbie's eyes. A world full of color and possibility, where every day was an adventure and every outfit was an opportunity to express oneself. "Oh my gosh, you guys!" John exclaimed, his voice higher and more animated than before. "Did you see the new fall collection at the mall? Those shoes are to die for!" Mary's eyes widened in surprise, a small smile tugging at her lips. "That's actually much better, John. Keep going." As the rehearsal continued, John found himself slipping more easily into Barbie's persona. He giggled at imaginary jokes, gushed over invisible outfits, and even flirted shyly with his male co-stars. By the end of the session, he was breathless and exhilarated, riding high on the rush of a breakthrough performance. But as he changed out of his costume and removed his makeup, a strange sense of unease settled over him. For a moment there, he had truly felt like Barbie. The character had ceased to be just a role and had become a part of him. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. Over the next few weeks, John's transformation continued both on and off stage. He found himself unconsciously adopting Barbie's mannerisms in his daily life, tilting his head when he laughed, walking with a slight sway in his hips, even using more expressive hand gestures when he spoke. His friends noticed the change, their reactions a mix of amusement and concern. During lunch one day, his best friend Tom finally broached the subject. "Hey, man," Tom said, his voice lowered conspiratorially. "Don't you think you're taking this whole Barbie thing a bit far?" John blinked, genuinely confused. "What do you mean?" Tom shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "It's just, you've been acting different lately, even when you're not in rehearsal. The way you talk, the way you move, it's like you're turning into Barbie for real." John felt a flash of defensiveness. "I'm just trying to stay in character. That's what good actors do, Tom. They fully commit to the role." But even as he said the words, a seed of doubt took root in his mind. Was he losing himself in the character? Had he crossed a line between acting and something else? That night, as John stood in front of his bedroom mirror, he found himself studying his reflection with new eyes. He noticed the softness in his features that he'd never paid attention to before, the graceful curve of his neck, the delicate arch of his eyebrows. Without thinking, he reached for the makeup kit Mary had given him for practice. His hands moved with surprising confidence as he applied foundation, blush, and mascara. When he was done, he barely recognized the person staring back at him. "Oh my gosh," he whispered, his voice automatically slipping into Barbie's higher register. "I look amazing!" A thrill ran through him, a mix of excitement and fear. He quickly wiped off the makeup, his heart pounding. What was happening to him? As opening night approached, John's internal struggle intensified. On stage, he was Barbie confident, bubbly, and unabashedly feminine. But off stage, he found himself caught between two identities, unsure of where John ended and Barbie began. The night before the premiere, John lay awake in bed, his mind racing. He thought about the journey he'd been on, the challenges he'd faced, and the discoveries he'd made about himself. For the first time, he allowed himself to consider the possibility that this role had awakened something in him, something that had always been there, buried beneath layers of societal expectations and his own preconceptions. When the curtain rose on opening night, John stepped onto the stage not as an actor playing a part, but as Barbie herself. The transformation was complete, and the audience was spellbound. His performance was flawless, every line delivered with perfect timing, every movement graceful and assured. As the final notes of the closing song faded away, the theater erupted in thunderous applause. John, or was it Barbie, stood center stage, basking in the adoration of the crowd. Tears of joy and relief streamed down his carefully made-up face. In the wings, Mary watched with a mix of pride and amazement. Her plan to humble John had backfired spectacularly. Instead of exposing his limitations, she had helped him discover a new side of himself, a depth of talent and courage she hadn't known he possessed. As the cast took their final bows, John caught Mary's eye. In that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. This wasn't just a performance. It was a revelation, a turning point in John's life. The curtain fell, but John knew that his journey was far from over. He had stepped into Barbie's plastic shoes and found a part of himself he never knew existed. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with questions about identity, self-expression, and societal expectations. But for the first time in his life, John felt truly free to explore who he was, beyond the roles he played on stage. As he changed out of his costume for the last time, John paused, looking at his reflection in the dressing room mirror. The makeup was smudged, the wig slightly askew, but beneath it all, he saw someone he was just beginning to know, a person who defied easy categorization, who contained multitudes. "Thank you, Barbie," he whispered, gently touching the mirror, "for helping me find myself." With a deep breath, John wiped away the last traces of makeup and stepped out of the dressing room. The world outside was waiting, full of new possibilities and challenges. But now, he felt ready to face them all, armed with a newfound understanding of himself and the courage to be true to who he really was, whoever that might turn out to be. As he walked through the bustling backstage area, cast and crew members congratulated him, their faces beaming with admiration. John accepted their praise with a gracious smile, but his mind was elsewhere, already contemplating the future. He found Mary surrounded by a group of well-wishers, her face flushed with the success of her play. When she saw John approaching, she excused herself and met him halfway. "John," she began, her voice thick with emotion. I don't know what to say. Your performance was beyond anything I could have imagined." John smiled, a hint of his old confidence returning, but tempered now with humility and self-awareness. "Thank you, Mary, but I owe it all to you. You pushed me out of my comfort zone, made me confront parts of myself I didn't even know existed." Mary shook her head, her eyes shining.
No, John. I may have given you the opportunity, but what you did with it, that was all you. You showed everyone tonight that true acting isn't just about pretending to be someone else. It's about finding the truth within yourself and bringing it to life on stage.
They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the evening's events settling around them. Finally, John spoke, his voice soft but determined.
I don't think I can go back to the way things were before, Mary. This experience, it's changed me. I'm not sure who I am anymore, but I know I need to figure it out.
Mary reached out and squeezed his hand. That's the beauty of it, John. You don't have to have all the answers right now. Life is a journey of self-discovery, and you've just taken your first brave steps. As they parted ways, John felt a sense of excitement bubbling up inside him. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, he felt truly alive, truly himself, even if he wasn't quite sure who that self was yet. In the days and weeks that followed, John found himself navigating a new reality. At school, some of his classmates looked at him differently, whispering behind his back or giving him strange looks, but others approached him with a new kind of respect, admiring his courage and his commitment to his art. John experimented with his appearance, sometimes incorporating subtle elements of femininity into his everyday wardrobe, a pastel shirt here, a delicate piece of jewelry there. He started growing his hair out, enjoying the way it softened his features. His parents were confused at first, unsure how to react to the changes in their son. But as they saw the newfound confidence and happiness radiating from John, they began to understand and support his journey of self-discovery. One afternoon, as John sat in his room, idly flipping through a fashion magazine, his younger sister knocked on the door. "Come in," he called, quickly closing the magazine and sitting up straighter. His sister peeked in, her eyes wide with curiosity. "John, can I ask you something?" "Sure, what's up?" She hesitated for a moment, then blurted out, Are you still my brother?" John felt his heart constrict. He patted the bed beside him, inviting her to sit down. "Of course I am. I'm still me, just figuring some things out. Why do you ask?" His sister shrugged, looking down at her hands. "It's just, you're different now. You talk different sometimes, and dress different. Some of the kids at school were saying." John put an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "Listen, kiddo, I'm always going to be your big brother, no matter what. I'm just learning more about myself, trying to figure out who I really am. But my love for you, that's never going to change." She looked up at him, a small smile forming on her face. "Promise?" "Promise," John said, giving her a squeeze. "And hey, maybe now you've got a brother who can help you with your makeup and give you fashion advice. How cool is that?" She giggled, the tension broken. "Pretty cool, I guess, as long as you don't steal my clothes." As his sister left the room, John felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He realized that his journey wasn't just about him. It affected everyone in his life. But with honesty and love, he could help them understand and accept the changes he was going through. Months passed, and John continued to explore his identity both on and off stage. He took on more diverse roles in school productions, relishing the opportunity to inhabit different characters and genders. But now, instead of losing himself in the roles, he found pieces of himself in each one, building a more complete picture of who he was. One day, as he was leaving rehearsal for a new play, he ran into Mary in the hallway. She was carrying a stack of scripts, her face lighting up when she saw him. "John, I've been meaning to talk to you. I've got a new play in the works, and I think you'd be perfect for the lead." John raised an eyebrow, a smirk playing at his lips. "Oh, and what sort of character will I be transforming into this time?" Mary laughed, shaking her head. "No transformations needed this time, John. The character is, well, they're a lot like you, actually. Someone on a journey of self-discovery, challenging societal norms and expectations. I was inspired by your experience with Barbie." John felt a lump form in his throat, touched by Mary's words. "Wow, Mary, I'd be honored to take on that role." Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my other socials if you want more wonderful content, early access, behind the scenes, and more. All links down below.